Your Facebook Live report starts now.
What's going on, guys? Drew Amman here at the Pitch Hill Nation studio alongside our senior analyst, Mike Irwin. It is time, SEC basketball time for the Razorbacks and Aggies. And tonight at 6, they will tip off from Bud Walton Arena. Arkansas started SEC play in College Station this past season and got a win, a tight win there against the Texas A&M Aggies. We'll see if Arkansas can get a win in the SEC opener against Texas A&M tonight. But, of course, again, this one will be in Fayetteville. Let's take a look at a graphic here with some notables and some things I want to point out as we continue this pregame show, which will go for about 20 minutes here with Mike. Look at it. The Hogs right now rank 17th in the country defensively, allowing less than 60 points per game. So the defense is really there. Teams only shooting the three ball at a 22% clip against Arkansas. And offensively, the Hogs average a shade under 75 points per game. And Mike, as we all know, let's go back to Sunday just for a minute and talk about IU just for a minute. The fact that, you know, defensively, great lockdown D there at Assembly Hall. IU had just 3 points scored there in the final 8 minutes. It was incredible what Arkansas's defense did there. But also just what Arkansas did offensively, just the ability to make shots in waves, and it starts with Mason Jones and Isaiah Joe.
Well, Joe was pretty consistent throughout the game. Mason Jones is what he's always been, which is kind of an inconsistent guy. Not only some games to the next game, but sometimes within games. He'll have a bad first half and then play really well down the stretch. And that's what he did. He was struggling early in that game. They both were, really. And there were a couple of times in that Indiana game when it looked like Arkansas was not only going to lose, but might get blown out. I think they were down by 11 early in the second half, and then, I don't know, 8 or 9 minutes to go, they're down by 9. But they just never, Indiana couldn't shake them. They never went away, and they just kept battling. And then you had that incredible run at the end, and some people have said, well, you know, IU just went cold. It's amazing to me how many skeptical people we have now. I think it's left over from football. They don't want to give this basketball team any credit. It's like, well, yeah, that was a big win, but doesn't really prove anything. And usually fans are fired up. They're mad if your team's, 11-1, they should be ranked. These people are like, nah, they don't deserve to be ranked. So it is kind of interesting.
Well, here's the bottom line. You go to somebody's house that's in the Big Ten and you win. That's huge.
It is big.
And obviously you wanted to get some payback as well as a different season, but in the second round of the NIT this past season, Arkansas saw its season come to a close there with a loss to IU, so you go back to Bloomington this time around in late December and you get a win. But let's segue. Let's talk about A&M, because A&M is 6-5. What have you seen from Buzz Williams' team? And it's interesting tonight, obviously, Buzz Williams in his first season leading the Aggies, and you got Eric Musselman in his first season leading the Razorbacks.
Well, they know each other pretty well, and they like each other. They both said good things about each other this week as they were asked about, the game and all that. If you, again, go back to just the game on paper, it shouldn't even be close. The fact that it's at home, it's a sellout. I don't know how full it will be. I don't expect it to be totally full, but because Razorback fans are infamous for just buying tickets and then some of them don't show up. I don't know why. But there should be a big crowd. And then you look at the numbers. I mean, you gave Arkansas 74 points a game, giving up just 59. That's pretty impressive. These guys are averaging 57 and giving up 60, so they're at a net 3 per game. And their shooting is awful, 38% from the floor, 23%. I mean, Arkansas is holding teams to around 20% three. They may not have to work hard to keep these guys because they don't shoot threes very well either, and they've given up 15 turnovers a game. Arkansas is forcing 18. So all this stuff lines up in Arkansas's favor. These guys have 2 guys in double figures. Their center, Jeff Nebo, is averaging around 11, a little over 11, and they've got a Savion Flagg, a forward who's 6'7" guy, but he's a 3-point shooter, and he's right at 11. Arkansas has 3 guys averaging more than their top scorer, and really they got 4 virtually in double figures. I think, I don't know, Desi Sills is at 9.8, so there's about 4 guys out there averaging double figures. So there just shouldn't be enough points out there for A&M to win this game. However, if you look at what they've done over the last 3 games, where they went from 3-5 to now 6-5, at which that may not be impressive, but it's a lot more impressive than they were. They've got a 3-game winning streak, and they played much better during those 3 games, doing a lot of things better. One of those wins was over an Oregon State team that was 9-1, and they just ran them out of the gym. That was at home, but that wasn't a close game, and they did a lot of stuff they haven't been doing. They shot threes. They were good in transition. They didn't turn the ball over. Their center and their forward really got involved in the game more. They had some block shots. good rebounding team. So if they do all of that tonight, they've got a chance in this game, because the only thing you have to worry about is Arkansas maybe overlooking these guys a little bit. If this were a year ago, I'd be really worried about this game. The only thing is, with Eric Musselman, there's so much intensity in preparing for the other team. I don't think players have time to overlook somebody.
Yeah, and speaking of, there he is, and the attention to detail we talk about, you would think that there are posters everywhere of Josh Nebo and Savion Flagg at practice. These are the tendencies. This is what they do well. We know Nebo is going to be a handful on the glass, and in particular, second chance opportunities. You really worry about Arkansas giving them that ping pong effect where they can just knock the ball around and have second, third, maybe even a fourth opportunity to get a basket on a possession. But, you know, Musselman is just great in terms of the possession game. Possession by possession, what he's able to do, getting this team ready to play game by game. And really, it's literally at the final horn after one game, moving on and getting ready for the next.
Exactly. I mean, we go back to that game in North Little Rock, which was always been a problem. I mean, Arkansas didn't always lose that game, but they struggled in that game a lot of times. And then you head out of there immediately for Christmas vacation, and then they would typically come back here to Fayetteville and struggle right off the bat in conference play. They had a horrible stretch there, went around the Christmas time and on into the New Year's last year. But with Musselman, what happened was, when those guys left North Little Rock that night, headed to wherever they were going, whether they were driving or flying or however they were getting back home, they're getting messages on their cell phone, and it's in a series of messages. It's the Indiana, scouting report. It's like, okay, this is the guy you have to worry about, and it's very detailed. And then he expected them, while they were at home, to text him back with questions. So they were having discussions about this, almost like you're in class, while they were at, you couldn't have done that a few years ago before cell phones, but now you can do that, and he's taking advantage of that. And here's the main thing. When they arrived back on Christmas Day, they didn't have to mess around and waste a whole day trying to install a bunch of stuff. They already knew what they were going to be doing. So it was just right off the bat, that Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, and then into the game on Saturday. They had to travel to Indiana on Saturday, but you had those 3 days of good intensity, and then they travel, and then they go and they win that game. So I don't think it was by accident that they played well. I don't think anything this year has been by accident. Somebody said to me, well, that shot that Mason Jones slopped in at the end to beat Georgia Tech, come on, it was a bank three-pointer. He's hit bank three-pointers before. It's not like he can't do that.
Yeah.
So you have to be in a position to win a game with something like that, and they're doing that. They've got confidence. I just like everything about what this team is doing right now, and it's because of the old school preparation with a lot of modern stuff thrown into it. Eddie Sutton prepared hard. His players hard. He didn't have cell phone to send them messages, while they were on Christmas break. So Eric Musselman's a modern day coach with old school work habits, and it's going to be interesting to see how this translates into SEC play. We've already seen some interesting games today. Conference play changes everything. So
it sure does. We already saw Georgia beat Memphis on the road. That's huge.
Absolutely.
Memphis, number 9 in the country, and then obviously you look at just some of the other games. LSU, a double-digit win at Tennessee. I mean, it's hard to go to Tennessee and win by that margin.
That's right.
I don't care what year you're talking about. But you mentioned Musselman's team, and the one loss this season came in overtime, and that's a game they should have won. They played at Western Kentucky. They lost 86-79. So Arkansas very well could be 12-0 entering tonight's SEC opener against Texas A&M. We'll talk more about it right now. I'm going to take some of your questions here on Facebook. And Mike, as I segue there, I just want to kind of talk about the fact that personnel-wise, I think when you look at A&M, we kind of talked about their top 2 guys, Savion Flagg, who is a guard, but he can stretch to a forward. So when they stretch him to the 4 spot, they go small. They're going to play a little more conventionally. They want to slow it down, first of all. And will they do that tonight and keep this game maybe in the 50s or 60s against Arkansas? Who knows? But Josh Nebo, as I mentioned, going to be a lot to deal with if you're Arkansas. But if they do go small and they put Flagg at the 4, that's the thing about Flagg. He can step out, hit the 3, and then you got to be concerned about perhaps what he can do on the inside as well.
Well, first of all, this business of a slowdown game. Eric Musselman said earlier this week that Arkansas can win either way. He said, we prefer a little more of an up-tempo game, but we've shown that we can win a slow game, medium pace, fast pace. And the other idea is that you could wear this team out, that somehow they've done all this stuff and they're only playing 7 guys most nights. They're going to get tired about this time of year and start wearing down. And he said, What we did was we got these guys in shape starting last summer, and we've kept them in shape, but we don't have workouts that task them physically. It's more mental what we do, and we've been over there a few times and seen the end of their workouts, and it is more mental work than physical, so they stay fairly fresh. And tonight wouldn't be a game in which you'd get pushed that way anyway, unless Arkansas does force the tempo, and even then, I think if they do, it'll be because that's what they want to do. But I don't think that just slowing this game down necessarily favors A&M. Now, it might, but Arkansas, again, has shown that they can play a slow-down game. What they do when they're in a game like that is that they're just very careful about everything they do. You got to make sure you rebound, and you've mentioned that. That's the one thing. This is a fairly good rebounding team, A&M is. So you got to block out. But look, they've played teams like this before. Indiana had big guys, bigger than A&M has. And they've shown through these drills that they do how they can contend with somebody like that.
Yeah, and you mentioned the size and just what you have to honor. I mean, obviously, Arkansas is undersized, and they hear that over and over again because that's the case. Lawrence Duncan actually has a comment here. Man, I wish we had more size. And Lawrence, being an Arkansas fan, I can totally understand what you're talking about. But if you're a defense going against Arkansas, this is what you have to honor. You have to honor that Mason Jones can score in multiple ways. And Isaiah Joe has shown he can do that now, but he stretches so far out. I mean, he's stretching out 24, 25 feet, where he will launch it to the point where it just opens up the floor so much. It opens it up so much to where the defense is going to be worn down because they have to honor that there's so much space created by virtue of the fact that Joe has so much range. It opens it up for guys like Jimmy Witt who can score in the mid-range.
Yeah, Isaiah Joe's actually better from an NBA range than he is a typical college NBA three. He's better when he steps, a foot or two back, step or two back there. So that does make him hard to cover. Now, I will say Indiana did the one thing they did was they shut Jimmy Witt down for a good portion of that game because they have a good interior defense. And that little shot where he works his way in and then hits that little falling back jump shot from 8-9 feet, that shot wasn't there for him. So we'll see if A&M can play that kind of defense. I'm not sure they can, but that's the one way you can hurt Arkansas is if you kind of chip away at Jimmy Witt and keep him, down to below double figures. And again, there's always this X factor of Mason Jones. If he has a bad game, they're in trouble. He wasn't playing well against Indiana, and then he had a great finish.
Yeah.
But if he had continued to play the way he was, they'd have lost the game. Mm-hmm. So you always have to look at him. And then what about that night, and you do have them from time to time when Isaiah Joe's not hitting those threes, then how do you make up for that? Well, still, it's through coaching, and you got a guy that goes in at halftime and makes adjustments, just like he did. I mean, Indiana, 6'9" McDonald's All-American forward who he scored 16 points on them in the first half. I thought he was going to kill them.
Yeah.
I thought he was going to have 35, 38 points. They held him to 4 in the second half because they went in and they made some adjustments, and he became a non-factor.
Mm-hmm. And Devontae Green at guard, he started to go off there early in the second half, and Arkansas made adjustments. So slowly but surely, and then really in the last 8 minutes, IU's offense considerably went away, and Arkansas was able to win the game there in Bloomington. But I do want to get some more comments in here. And, another thing about this is that, if you look at the bench, how much of a factor Jalen Harris has to be and how much of a factor Reggie Chaney has to be. Chaney, you talk about it so much, but in particular when you go against somebody like Josh Nebo, because what you see is a lot of these teams that have a really big post presence in terms of one guy having such a factor, having such an impact, that is. James Banks from Georgia Tech. James Banks for Georgia Tech. They were able to get him the basketball quite often. Tonight you're going to see it again. They want to front the post, as Buzz mentioned. Arkansas wants to front the post. You'll see Adrio Bailey do that. So once they throw it over the top of Adrio, who's going to be there with the help defense? But Arkansas has shown time and again that help defense has been there this year, Mike.
Well, Chaney, first part of this, like late November, early to mid-December, was more of a guy that he was out there to absorb some fouls. This team could get in foul trouble with the kind of numbers they have. So he was a guy that was in there inside getting some of those fouls and didn't give Adrio Bailey in foul trouble. But he's shown signs lately of really coming around. I think that guy, before he's done here, is going to be a really good player offensively. He has nights where he really surprises you. And so he's at that point in the season when we should see him step up a little more. I'm looking for a lot more out of him offensively in SEC play, and we'll see if that starts tonight.
Yeah, and Jalen Harris being that second point guard for Arkansas, you know, you've seen those lineups that Musselman will go with at times where you have both Harris and Witt on the floor at the same time. Witt's such a great rebounding guard that, you know, if you can get that going as well, that's always a huge factor. But Harris, if he can just maximize the minutes he gets, and that's the point. They have 2 or 3, maybe 4 guys right now that are playing so many minutes, but when Harris gets in, just for him to play mistake-free hoops is going to be that much more of a big factor for Arkansas, and what a contribution it could be. This question here actually is a little more of a comment, so to speak. Mike and Mary Hoggard says, wondering if A&M has better conditioning than Indiana. Those guys were pooped at the end. Well, we'll find out.
There's no way to know that.
Yeah, it's really hard to say. Another comment on here is just kind of a question about Ethan Henderson. And we saw Ethan Henderson provide a spark here a few games ago to where, you know, he was really more or less a guy who was honored there in practice thereafter because of the minutes he was able to give Arkansas in a game in which it was struggling. But Ethan Henderson is somebody who came on a little bit at the tail end of last season. We didn't see him at all last season until the Providence game, and then he had a good game. But, you know, this is a team, and you mentioned it, Mike, that plays 7 guys, and that's the difference.
Yeah, he's another guy that a lot of times when you see him, he's in there to absorb some fouls. If you've got a couple of guys in there, if both Chaney and Adrio have, you know, 3 fouls, he's a guy you would see in there to absorb some fouls. But he's had a couple of nice games. People are always asking about him. Generally, when we see him play, it's because he's played well, he's done well in practice. So if you see him in the game tonight, it'll be because he's had a good week of prep. And if you don't, it's because he didn't impress the coaches. Yeah. That's about as simple as I can make it.
And the other thing is foul trouble, because if somebody like Mason Jones does get in foul trouble, all the more reason why, you know, at that point, Musselman may have to reach deep into his bench and maybe play 8 or 9 guys. And that's kind of something I'm going to go to here as we close this Facebook Live, and that's from Kyle Chandler. Kyle wants to know, what does Mason Jones need to do differently to keep out of foul trouble early? Well, the thing that's so impressive to me about this team just initially is what they do so early in a defensive possession. They get down in a defensive stance early, and they're set to where they just seemingly do such an incredible job getting a hand up and causing some type of distraction of the offense to where they're just able to contest, whether it's being able to contest in the corner or in the middle, to where, you know, they just don't allow you to drive and get anything easy. That's the point I'm trying to make. But bottom line is, it kind of goes back to the old school approach of don't reach. You know, no dumb fouls, particularly if you're well away from the basket.
Yeah, Mason Jones, a very good player. He's a streaky player, as I've mentioned, but he's somebody that sometimes gets out of control. And I think that's one of the things Eric Musselman has said to himself, you know, once he saw this kid, and he looked at video from last year. I got to get him a little more under control, make him more consistent, kind of iron out the rough spots, and have him concentrate on what he does well. So what you have to do to keep him out of foul trouble early is really work with him in practice, which they do every day, and then it's more mental. You just got to keep reminding him, look, you know, here's what you did in this game, and you got yourself in foul trouble. That's not what we do. So we'll see. But generally, in both respects, defensively and offensively, there are just nights when he's off, and there are nights when he's on. And again, as I said before, there are portions of the game where that's true. You're looking at him, you're thinking, man, he stinks tonight. And the next thing you know, he takes over. That was pretty much the Valpo game. He just went nuts at the end of the game and won the game for him. So you can never count him out.
And Isaiah Joe with 24 in that game against IU, 21 for Mason Jones. And you would never have thought that Mason would finish with that mark, considering the way he was rattled early in that game. Desi Sills, another guy you really got to point out, because he's been a bulldog. He's been a guy,
really has improved.
Yeah, he's really been savvy, the sophomore out of Jonesboro, and he knows that when that deep shot is not falling for him, he's able to create. He's able to get the basket and perhaps even get some of the bigger guys in foul trouble, because you know how much that's going to be a mismatch this season for Arkansas all season long, knowing there will be bigger teams they'll face down the road. Here in the grind of the SEC opener tonight, Arkansas, Texas A&M. We'll see you for post-game as the Razorbacks will be at Bud Walton Arena. It is a sellout. We'll see you.